Hallo, Deutschlerner! Reflexive pronouns are words that are used in place of a noun as the direct object or indirect object of a sentence when both the subject and the object are the same person, place, or thing. Most of the time, these are used with people, but it is possible to use them in other circumstances. In German, they very closely resemble the personal pronouns in the accusative and dative cases, with a few small exceptions. There are links in the description to my videos about those two groups of pronouns, but I will also review them a bit in this video. Let's look at an example of a reflexive pronoun in use so we understand why we need them in the first place. Er rasiert sich. He shaves himself. This is a pretty basic example. There is a subject, er, and an object, sich. The subject is shaving the object, and the subject and object are the same person. Okay, but why can't we just say he shaves like we would in English? Why do we have to identify the person or thing being shaven? The verb rasieren requires an object. You can't just shave in German. You have to identify the person or object that is being shaven. It's just how the verb works. Okay, so why can't you just say he shaves his face? Er rasiert sein Gesicht. The problem here is that we can't be 100% sure that the er and sein refer to the same person. If the person shaving is masculine and the person being shaven is masculine, the sentence er rasiert sein Gesicht would be used to describe this situation. So I'm using a reflexive pronoun to show that I'm not shaving someone else's face. Pretty much, yeah. Well, how would you say he is shaving his face with the intent that both he and his are referring to the same person? Er rasiert sich das Gesicht. He shaves his face. Why das Gesicht and not sein Gesicht? Well, it would be a bit redundant. You already identified whose face it is by using the reflexive sich. This tells us that the person being shaven is the same as the he in the subject. Once you have already done that, you just need to identify the part of that person that is being shaven, which is das Gesicht. That said, the sentence er rasiert sich sein Gesicht is a perfectly normal way of phrasing that same expression. You can express it either way, but the reflexive pronoun must still be there no matter which version you use. Now that you've wrapped your brain around the why, let's talk about the how. If you're familiar with the personal pronouns in German, you will know that there are 9 of them in each of the nominative, accusative, and dative cases. If you know those, you already have 4 of the 9 rows in this chart. The only thing that changes between the personal pronouns chart and the reflexive pronouns chart is the word sich. This word is kind of the de facto reflexive pronoun. When people want to illustrate that a verb is being used reflexively, they use the pronoun sich to indicate this. The pronoun sich is used for all of the third-person reflexive forms. This follows with the er, sie, es, and plural sie forms. The formal you, sie, is also used with the pronoun sich. This is easily explained by Past Me for my A1 beginner course video. The pronoun that is now used as the formal you in German is actually derived from the third-person plural sie, which is they in English. This comes from the idea that if you were to show someone respect back in the olden days, you shouldn't address them directly at all, which means that sie is less a formal version of you than a capitalized version of they. This also explains the reason why sie and sie are always the same on these charts, and they always take the same form of the verb. With all of the times that sich is used in this chart, you can actually condense the reflexive pronouns chart down to 6 rows, instead of the standard 9. Now our chart looks like this. Some teachers condense this even further because most of the pronouns are the same between the accusative and dative cases. Then the chart looks like this. This is my personal favorite version of the reflexive pronouns chart. I leave the nominative case personal pronouns column in there for reference and combine as much of the rest of the chart as I can so that you don't have to memorize as much stuff. If the subject uses one of the nominative case personal pronouns, use the corresponding reflexive pronoun if you need one of those. Obviously, you can also figure out which reflexive pronoun to use by finding which nominative case personal pronoun would replace the noun or nouns that are the subject in any given sentence. Let's take a look at some more examples. Ich dusche mich. I am showering. Ich is the subject, so the reflexive pronoun must be from the same row in the chart. I use the accusative one here, but I'll explain when to use the accusative or dative ones in a few minutes. Zieh dich change your clothes. Here I used a command, which removes the pronoun du from the sentence. This does not change the reflexive pronoun, however. we still need the reflexive pronoun to match the invisible subject, du, in the sentence. Again, I chose the accusative case version, but more on that in a bit. Mein Bruder putzt sich die Zähne. My brother is brushing his teeth. If you replace mein Bruder with a pronoun, you would say er in this sentence. So we need a reflexive pronoun from that same row. The only one in that row is sich. Die Frau bürstet sich die Haare. The woman is brushing her hair. If you replace die Frau with a pronoun, you would use sie. Again, the only reflexive pronoun from that same row is sich. Das Mädchen konzentriert sich auf die Hausaufgaben. The girl concentrates on the homework. Wir freuen uns auf das Wochenende. We are looking forward to the weekend. Ihr werdet euch erkälten. You will catch a cold. Die Schüler ärgern sich über die Hausaufgaben. The students are becoming annoyed about the homework. Regen Sie sich nicht so auf. Don't get so agitated. As you can see in those examples, the subject and the object are the same person, so we use the reflexive pronoun that is in the same row as the subject. Now let's figure out which column to use. When do we use the accusative and when do we use the dative pronouns? The deciding factor between accusative and dative reflexive pronouns is the presence of a direct object or the lack thereof. If there is already an object in the sentence, before you add in the reflexive pronoun, the reflexive must be dative, as the other object takes the accusative spot. If there is not another object, however, the reflexive pronoun is used in the accusative case. For example, ich wasche mich. I am washing myself. Here the only object is the reflexive pronoun, mich. We use the accusative case because there is not another object. Ich wasche mir die Hände. I am washing my hands. In this sentence, the hands are the direct object, which puts them in the accusative case. The only space left for the reflexive pronoun is in the dative case, so I used mir instead of mich for this one. You can also think of the default position for reflexive pronouns as the accusative case, as they usually represent the direct object of the sentence. When you add in an additional object, that object takes on the role of the direct object, accusative case, and the reflexive pronoun is now in the position of the indirect object, dative case. Let's try a few more examples. Stell dir ein Einhorn vor. Imagine a unicorn. This sentence has the word Einhorn as the direct object. This forces the reflexive pronoun to use the dative case. The verb vorstellen can be a bit confusing. For example, you might say something like this. Stell dir vor, du bist der Lehrer. Imagine you are the teacher. You don't see a direct object in this sentence, but the clause after the comma sort of acts like a direct object in this sentence, which puts the reflexive pronoun into the dative case. There's also another version of this verb, vorstellen. If you use the accusative case with your reflexive pronoun with this verb, the translation becomes to introduce oneself. For example, stell dich vor, introduce yourself. Some students of German are confused when there is a prepositional phrase in the sentence. In English, we sometimes think that these things are acting like direct objects, so the students want to use the dative reflexive pronoun, but that is not the case. Here's an example of what I mean. Ich gewöhne mich an meine neuen Schuhe. I am getting used to my new shoes. One might think that the shoes are the direct object of the sentence, but in German, the preposition an is being used. The shoes are simply the object of that preposition. They are not the direct object. The only direct object in this sentence is mich, the accusative reflexive pronoun. Another verb that acts like this is erinnern, to remember. It is paired with the preposition an to express that you remember something. For example, ich erinnere mich an mein erstes Auto. I remember my first car. This is especially confusing as the English translation does use the car as the direct object of the sentence, while the German sentence keeps das Auto in the prepositional phrase with an. The reflexive pronoun, therefore, is accusative. One of the cool things about reflexive pronouns is their impact on several phrases with two-way prepositions. When you use a two-way preposition in a sentence with a reflexive pronoun, there is a good chance that you need the accusative case for both the reflexive pronoun and the object of that two-way preposition. Let me show you what I mean. Setz dich an den Tisch hin. Sit down at the table. The reflexive pronoun is being used here because the verb setzen requires you to identify what is being set. This is the direct object. The thing being set is the same as the subject, so you use the reflexive pronoun. Since the prepositional phrase is expressing a change in location of that direct object, The two-way preposition is also used with the accusative case. Ich lege mich eine Weile auf das Sofa. I am laying down on the sofa for a while. This sentence always confused me as a German student. Why is there a reflexive pronoun there at all? Why does the preposition require the accusative case? How does any of this make sense with the words eine Weile in there? If you're laying down for a while, that doesn't describe a change in location in my mind. In reality, there's a bit more going on here. Similar to the verb setzen, the verb legen requires a direct object. If the subject is the same as that direct object, you need the reflexive pronoun. Since the verb itself indicates a change in location for the direct object, the preposition requires that same description as well. This makes the preposition require the accusative case, as it shows to where the mich is being laid down. The words eine Weile simply tells us how long I intend on remaining in my new location. This does not affect the case of either the reflexive or the two-way preposition. The last version of things that I want to talk to you about is something that I mentioned earlier. When you use a reflexive pronoun with a command, you have to remember what the subject is. This is a bit tricky for the do and ir form commands, as they require you to remove the pronoun when you form them. This is sometimes confusing to German learners, so I wanted to take a look at a few commands in various forms with reflexive pronouns to see how they work. Beeil dich. Hurry up. Here we use the do form command. In a regular statement, the sentence would be Du beeilst dich. You are hurrying. When we change this into a command, we remove the pronoun du and the st at the end of the verb. The reflexive pronoun remains in the sentence and matches the subject that is not actually said or written in the sentence. Kümmert euch das Baby. Take care of the baby. In this one, I use the ir form command. The regular statement version of this would be Ihr kümmert euch das Baby. You are taking care of the baby. In the command form, we simply remove the pronoun ihr. The reflexive pronoun still matches that subject, even though it is not explicitly said or written in the command. Fürchten Sie sich nicht vor meinem Hund. Don't be afraid of my dog. In this one, we clearly see that the pronoun sie is still there, so it's less confusing than the previous two examples. The reflexive pronoun still matches the subject sie, just as the other sentences match their subjects. I made a video just for you. It's linked over here, and it includes 62 example sentences using reflexive verbs. If you want to know why it is that I've never called any of today's verbs reflexive verbs, click over here to see my explanation about that. Das ist alles für heute. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss!